What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boy Valeria White. Check it back in with another video. I go by V for short, and in this video, I will be teaching you how to build a search engine just like Google. Well, maybe not like Google. Google's a little bit more complicated, but we will be building a very basic search engine all within the AWS console, okay? I'm excited. I'm ready for it. I know you all are excited about it. Make sure you go ahead and leave that thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and let's get right into the video. All right, now before we jump into the video and get into the meat of things, I want to make sure that you all know that I have my GitHub link down in the description box below that has the entire lab that we're going to go through right now in text form, all right? It's going to have all the code there. It's going to be what I reference in the video, so make sure you go down there, click that GitHub link, put it to another tab as we follow along and finish this lab together. All right, let's get back into the video. All right, so the first thing I want to show you is the architectural diagram that we will use in order to build this very basic search engine, okay? So as you can see, we're not using many services in the AWS console. We have AWS Amplify, Amazon API Gateway, AWS Identity and Access Management, AWS Lambda, and Amazon DynamoDB, okay? So I'm gonna quickly go through it, and then we're gonna go ahead and jump into building this thing, right? So we are the users, right? And we're gonna log on to the AWS Amplify, right? And Amplify is gonna hold our static website. This is actually gonna be the user interface that we go to, a www.website that we go to and type in whatever we need to type in to search, okay? Now, once we search, it's going to call on Amazon API Gateway. It's going to have a REST API here. That REST API is then going to call on AWS Lambda, which is going to ask for permission in order to access Amazon DynamoDB, which has the information that we're searching for in this AWS Amplify static website, okay? So that's a quick overview of the architectural diagram that we're going to be building. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get to step number one. Okay, step number one is going to be for us to create and populate our DynamoDB table. Now, before we jump into it, there's two things I want to go over. All right, I know you all are wondering what type of search engine are we going to be building since we're not building a Google search engine, right? Again, it's going to be very basic. So at a high level, what we're going to be building is pretty much a search engine that gives us information back about video games, all right? So we're going to build a database with some video game information, and then we're going to search that game, and then it's going to give us some information back on that game, okay? Very basic, very simple, okay? So that's number one. Number two is, if you look on the screen, I want to make sure you all see, I'm currently in the AWS console, that I'm going to be operating out of US 1, which is the North Virginia region. So I do want to say, whatever region that you're going to be working out of, make sure that you're building all of your apps and services within that same region, okay? So let's go ahead and let's get into creating and populating our DynamoDB table. So if we go ahead and click DynamoDB here, I'm at the dashboard. I'm going to click Create Table, right? I'm going to follow the same naming convention that's in the GitHub document, right? So I'm going to name this Gaming Search Engine, all right? The partition key, right? We're going to name that name of game, right? All right, sort key, we're going to leave blank. Everything else is going to be default, and we're going to click Create Table at the bottom right. All right, give that a few seconds, and then that should be done creating. Few seconds. All right, so that's all done. So now that we've created our DynamoDB table, the next thing we want to do is populate the DynamoDB table with the information that we will actually call upon when we are at the search engine, right? The URL, right? So let's go ahead and click on Gaming Search Engine. Let's click on Explore Table Items at the top right here. Let's go down and let's click Create Item. Now again, if you go ahead and go to the GitHub, you'll see that I have a table with the 5 games that we're going to populate this database with, okay? So let's go ahead and go in here. And the first game that I have is Grand Theft Auto V. All right, that's going to be the name of the game. We're going to click Add New Attribute. Let's make it a string type value. The next attribute name is going to be category. And Grand Theft Auto is going to be categorized as an open world shooter. All right, one more attribute, string. The last attribute is going to be ESRB rating, which is pretty much just the rating that states whether or not is it for teens, is it for everybody, etc., etc. And Grand Theft Auto is for mature audience, so everybody is 17 and older. All right. So those are the three categories, or the three attributes rather, and these are the values that align with those attributes, right? So let's go ahead and click create item. All right, as you can see, that is created. And what I'll go ahead and do, I'm gonna go ahead and click here, click actions, and then I'm gonna go ahead and click duplicate. And I'm gonna go down and I'm gonna type in Fortnite, God of War, Call of Duty Warzone, and Minecraft, all showing within that table. All right, so let me go ahead and knock that out real quick. I'm gonna pause the video here and I'll get back once it's done. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, I went ahead and completed the DynamoDB population of the information that we need. So you see I have 5 games here: Minecraft, Call of Duty Warzone, God of War, Fortnite, Grand Theft Auto 5, the categories for them, and the ESRB rating for all 5 of those as well, okay? So that concludes step number 1. Okay, step number 2 is gonna be for us to create our Lambda IAM role so that our Lambda has access to our DynamoDB table once it calls upon it to get information from it, okay? So let's go ahead and create that. We're gonna go to the IAM console. As you can see here, I have it as a shortcut, so I'm gonna click it here. All right, let's go ahead and let's go to create policies first. Right, click create policy. Okay, once you click create policy, you'll have this screen here. If you go to the GitHub link, all you have to do is click this JSON button here, highlight all of this, delete it, go to GitHub, copy the correct permissions, come in here and then paste it, as you can see here. Once it's pasted, this actually gives us permission to access DynamoDB via putting things in there, via deleting the items, via getting the items, scanning the items, etc., etc. So this gives our Lambda full permission of our DynamoDB table, okay, that we just created, right? And it's all Dynamo, the one we just created. And let's click next. Okay, let's name this Lambda API Gateway, DynamoDB, and role, okay? So the same name as in the GitHub link. So scroll down, let's click create policy. Fail to create policy, so they're saying I already have one, right? So let's just put 1 right there. I know I deleted the last one, maybe just take some time. All right, so we just named it here, Lambda API Gateway, DynamoDB, role 1. All right, so let's now go to roles right here. Let's click create role. All right, AWS service, let's click on Lambda, right? Because that's what we want. We want to be able to allow our Lambda to call on DynamoDB on our behalf as it shows here. Click next. All right, let's go ahead and go to that policy we just created, Lambda. I'm just typing Lambda for short. All right, so it appears I did already have one, but this is the one we just created with the number 1, so I'm gonna select that one. Even though they're the same thing, scroll down, click next. Okay, right here, I'm gonna name it the same thing, Lambda API Gateway, DynamoDB, all right, and then role. Hopefully I don't have a name named that already, right, like last time. Let's go ahead and click create role. All right, so it's creating, boom. So now our role has been created, and that, my friends, complete step number 2. So let's go ahead and take a look at the screen. Let's go ahead and go to our Lambda console. So I have a shortcut here, so I'm gonna click there. Once your dashboard has loaded, let's go ahead and click create function. Author from scratch, that looks good. Function name, let's name it gaming search engine, all right. For the runtime, let's go ahead and pick Python 3.8. That's the language that we're gonna be using in order to code this Lambda function. All right, let's go to permissions. Let's click this drop down. Let's click on use an existing role. And what we're actually doing, we're going to assign the role that we just created in the previous step. All right, so if you all remember, it's going to be Lambda API Gateway DynamoDB role, okay? You may have to type it in. If not, it should just pop up right here, right? So go ahead and click that. Advanced setting, we're gonna leave everything as default, and then we're gonna click on create function. All right, so boom, so my function has been created, all right? The next step that I want you all to do, scroll down. You may have this code, you may not. Let's go ahead and click out of this. Let's click OK. All right, so what we want to do is go ahead and highlight everything that's already here. This is the sample code. Let's delete it and then go to the GitHub, copy the Python code for our Lambda function in that link, and I'm gonna just paste it here. I already have mine copied. And then what you want to do is hit deploy. All right, now essentially the code that we just copied and pasted in here, this is going to call upon a DynamoDB table and extract information back to us based off of the game name that we insert as an event, right? So for instance, once we get to our search engine at the very end of this video, we're going to type in the game name. It's going to call upon Lambda, and Lambda now has the capability based off of this code in order to go to our DynamoDB table and pull the information that it needs for us to read. I guess the different information regarding that particular game that we search for, okay? So let's go ahead. We see that that has been successfully deployed, and that concludes step number 3. Okay, step number 4 is going to be for us to test our Lambda function, okay? This is going to be very quick. So we already deployed our Lambda function, so in order to test it, we want to go to this test button here, click this drop down, click configure test. All right, let's just name it test. Doesn't really matter what you name it right here. Let's scroll down this event JSON. Let's delete the default and then go to the GitHub, copy and paste the test code from there. Copy the test code from there. Then we're going to paste it here. So the test or the event that we're going to send to our Lambda function is we're going to request information for the game called Minecraft, okay? And again, if you remember when we created our DynamoDB table, the partition key is name of game, okay? That's our partition key. So this is the schema that Lambda needs in order to properly use the get function that allows it to read from my DynamoDB, all right? So that is looking good. So let's go ahead and click save. All right, now that it's saved, all we have to do is click on this button test, and we should get a successful execution. All right, so we got a response, 200 code, and this is the information we pulled back, right? So it gave us the name of the game, it gave us what is the ESRB rating, and it gave us the category, all right? So essentially, again, we searched for this game, and it gave us information back in our to-be search engine once we get to the last step of this lab, okay? So that go ahead and completes step number 4. All right, step number 5 is gonna be for us to create and deploy our API, all right? So let's go ahead and look at the AWS console and make our way to API Gateway, okay? Type it in up here in the search bar right here. I'm gonna click API Gateway. All right, so I'm gonna scroll down. This is the user interface that I have. I'm gonna scroll down till I see REST API. I'm gonna click on that. This is build, so you can only access this via the VPC, so we're not gonna click on that one. We're gonna click on this first one, which is gonna be public. So let's click build. You may get this icon, or this notice rather, click OK. All right, let's go ahead and click on new API, right? Let's keep that REST as selected, and let's name this gaming search engine. All right. After that, let's go ahead and keep that regional, and then we go ahead and click Create API. Very simple, and our API has been created, okay? Next thing you want to do, you want to go ahead and go to Actions, drop that down, click on Method. Once you click Method, we're actually going to be using the post call. So let's click another drop down right here, and then click Post. After you do that, go ahead and click that check button right there. All right, so now we want to go ahead and integrate the Lambda function that we created in the previous step with this REST API that we're creating here, all right? So integration type is Lambda function. Everything else keeps the same. Lambda region, my region is US East 1, as I stated earlier in this lab. And the function we want to call on is the gaming search engine. So let's go ahead and begin typing it in. Gaming search engine. Beautiful, so it showed right there. Let's click save. All right, you're about to give permission for your API gateway to evoke your Lambda function. We want that. Click OK. All right, beautiful, beautiful. So all that looks good. This is optional. I'm going to go ahead and do it in this lab, but let's go ahead and click test to make sure that this REST API is properly calling upon and invoking our Lambda function properly. So we know our Lambda works when we put in the name the name of the game, right? And we got information back. So let's do the same thing, but we're gonna do it from the REST APIs. And we should be getting the same response back, right? So let me go ahead and type it in. So we have that. And then let's put the partition key, which is name of game, right? Let's go back, hit the semicolon, and then let's put God of War this time, right? And that should be good. So let's scroll down, let's hit test. Let's go back up, and we have a 200 code. So we got that, the name of game, God of War. We got the rating for it. We got the category. So that is a success, which basically means that our REST API is properly connected to our Lambda, which our Lambda function is evoking this get call to ask our DynamoDB what is associated with this God of War. So everything is connected properly, all right? So that's good. Next thing we want to do before we deploy this API, now that we test it, we want to go into this action button, drop it down, and we want to go ahead and click enable cores, all right, which is cross-origin resource sharing, all right? So once you click on that, make sure this is checked, which it should already be, and then click enable cores and replace existing cores headers, all right? This is going to pop up. Go ahead and click yes, replace existing values. Now, while that's doing that, the reason why this is important is because this API is going to be deployed on a domain that's going to be different from our web app, our web application, right? So essentially what Cores enables us to do, it allows us to still call upon our API even though the web application is in a separate domain, all right? So that is good. That is enabled. And then the last thing, go to this actions button and then click on deploy API. All right, deployment stage, let's go ahead and drop that down, click new stage. For stage name, let's just use dev for development, leave everything blank, and then click deploy. All right, beautiful. So we have finished creating and deploying our API, our REST API. One thing I do want to note is make sure to take note of this link right here because we're going to be using it in the next step. All right, so I went ahead and copied mine just now. All right, so that, my friends, complete step number 5. Okay, step number 6 is going to be for us to update our HTML code and save it. Okay, now we are going to be updating it with that invoke URL that we made from our REST API. So let me go ahead and go to the GitHub. This is the code that we're going to update. So if you scroll down, and if you see this invoke URL, you're going to replace this placeholder with the actual URL from your API gateway, your REST API, excuse me, that we deployed on API gateway. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and walk you through it. So let's go ahead and copy this entire thing. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to Notepad, right? Once you're at Notepad, I'm going to paste it right here, right? And then let me go ahead and go back and let me grab my URL. So you see it right here. Let's go ahead and grab that right here. Copy. Once that's grabbed, you want to go back to your Notepad. Find the invoke URL. Highlight it. And then paste the actual URL from your REST API. Once that's done, you want to go ahead and hit File. Save As. And I'm going to go ahead and save it as index.html. This is very important. You must save it as index.html if you decide to use a notepad, because what happens is, for one, the file has to be in HTML format, right? So that's why I have this .html, right? For two, the name of the file has to be index, which is the first part, okay? So because I'm doing it in a notepad, right? If I don't put the .html, it's going to recognize it as a .txt, right? So that's what the .html for. And then we have to also name it index, because once we get to the next step, which is Amplify, by default, identifies whatever file that we upload to it by the name of index, okay? So let's go ahead and I'm going to save it to the desktop, right? So let me go back. Let me actually, looks like I have my icons hidden. Show icons. All right, so it's right here, right? So I'm gonna right click it. I'm on a Windows and I'm gonna send it to a zip folder. That's the next step. And I'm gonna leave the name as index, okay? So this right here is the format, this right here is the format that Amplify needs the file to be once we upload it to that service, right? In order to go ahead and start our static website, all right? So that concludes step number 6. Okay, step number 7 is going to be for us to create our website using the Amplify service right on AWS, okay? So I made my way back to the AWS console. We're currently under the API Gateway console. Let's go ahead and go to the search bar if you already don't have a shortcut for this next service, and that is Amplify. All right, so AWS Amplify. And this service is going to allow us to host our HTML static website that we just saved to the zip file. And we're going to deploy it on this service here, right? So let's go ahead and click on Get Started. And we're going to be hosting, so help host your web app. So click Get Started right here as well. All right, let's go ahead and click Deploy Without Git Provider. Click Continue. App name, we're going to name it Gaming Search. What just happened? Search engine. All right, perfect. Environment name, let's just put dev. Doesn't matter. Put dev for development. And then we're going to drag and drop the file that we just made. All right, so let me go ahead and let me get that. It's right here. I'm going to drag it and I'm going to drop it right here. So again, I'm dragging and drop the zip file of that index. All right, so I just dragged and dropped it here. Let's go ahead and click on Save and Deploy. Again, what we just did, we took the HTML code that we saved in this file and we're dragging and dropping it into Amplify so that it can host our static website directly here. All right, so deployment is successfully done. Perfect. So let's go ahead, and this is the domain that's associated with our static website that we just uploaded, okay? And if you notice, again, the domain is amplifyapp.com, and the API gateway the REST API that we made an API gateway, it has a different URL, okay? So that's why, again, just to reiterate why we had to enable cores, right? It's because this domain is different from where our REST API is living, right? This is a Amplify app, and our REST API, I believe, is the Amazon.com, right? So that's why we had to enable cores. But besides the point, let's go ahead and click on this link, make sure it works. Boom. So this is the HTML code, right? And everything looks good. Perfect, perfect. So that, my friend, concludes step number 7. Okay, step number 8 is going to be for us to test our web page, all right? So as you can see, we made it to the very end of this lab, right? We have our static website. We have our HTML website. It's hosted. It's online. This is the user interface. This is essentially our Google, right? Well, not quite Google, it's the basic version, right? So let's go ahead and test and make sure that it's working properly and that the API gateway will be called on. And once called on, the API gateway will then evoke the Lambda function, which will then pull information from my DynamoDB table, okay? So let's type in one of the games. That's how we get this whole process going. So let's type in maybe like Minecraft, right? And you see I already have it here. Let's hit submit. Boom, we have a response. So that looks good. Let's type in maybe Grand Theft Auto 5. Let's hit submit. Boom, that looks good. And let's just type in one more, right? Let's type in Minecraft, Grand Theft Auto. Let's type in Fortnite and hit submit. Boom, so that looks perfect. Now, obviously, we can improve upon this basic search engine, right? So right now, this is case sensitive. The format and layout of how the response comes, it doesn't look as friendly. It's still in this code-like format, right? But all that can be changed by updating the HTML code. We can also switch it from using a GET response via our Lambda function, maybe to a query. So maybe we don't have to be as exact in our search. So there's a lot of ways we can update this search engine. But again, this is just a lab that should kind of show you high level from a very basic perspective how you can use the AWS console to build a search engine, okay? So that go ahead and that concludes step number 8. All right, ladies and gentlemen, steps 9, 10, 11, and 12 is going to be for us to clean up our workspace, which means we're going to delete everything we just created. So I'm going to quickly go over it. All right, so our Amplify, you want to go ahead and go to all apps. click on the game and search app, click action at the top right, and click delete app. Once that comes up, you want to go ahead and type in delete. All right, so that's deleted. Next thing you want to go, let's go to API gateway, right? And we made this API here, game and search engine. I'm going to highlight it, click actions, click delete, and then click delete again. So that's gone. Next, we want to go to our Lambda function that we created. I'm going to type that in, click on the Lambda function. I only have one, which is the one we created. Highlight it, click actions, then click delete. You have to type in delete and then tap delete. So that's done. Hit close. And then lastly, you want to go to DynamoDB. Don't forget DynamoDB because you will get charged for this if you have it too long. Hit not Explorer. Hit tables. Excuse me. Highlight game and search engine. Hit delete. And then hit confirm. Delete all CloudWatch. That's good. We do not want to create a backup, so that's good. And hit delete. Left click, not right click. And that is deleting, okay? So that, my friends, concludes this lab and completes 9, 10, 11, and 12. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate everybody who stuck to the very end and made it through the entire lab. That concludes it. We have successfully built Google, the very, very basic form of Google, all right? The very basic, all right? But again, in all seriousness, I appreciate everybody who stayed to the very end. Make sure to leave a thumbs up, leave a comment down below if you would like to see more videos like this, if you want to maybe provide a suggestion of how to update it or things you would do differently, etc., etc., all right? All the love is much appreciated. I want to say peace out and God bless. Y'all take care.